Oops, I knocked over your wedding cake. Guess you'll just have to get another one, my sister said, smiling sweetly across the reception hall. Her revenge for me refusing to bankroll her $9,000 Hawaii trip. Mom chimed in with, "Don't be selfish." That night, I canceled her all-inclusive booking, every last dollar of it. By morning, she was pounding on my hotel room door, desperate. I should have seen it coming the moment my sister realized I wasn't going to hand over thousands of dollars for her latest adventure. But I never expected her to strike in the middle of my own wedding reception, in front of nearly 100 guests, using my $2,700 custom cake as her weapon of choice. The warning signs started 3 weeks before the wedding. She called me while I was at work, practically bubbling over with excitement about this once-in-a-lifetime vacation she was planning with her new boyfriend, a charming guy who had managed, during our first meeting, to ask how much money I made before he even bothered to ask what I did for a living. She described every detail of their dream trip: first-class flights to Hawaii, a luxury oceanfront resort, swimming with dolphins, helicopter tours over active volcanoes. I listened, assuming she was just sharing her excitement about the trip she'd been saving for. Then she dropped the bombshell like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "So you'll be covering most of the costs? Not lending, paying for it outright?" I told her flat out that while I could contribute something toward it, I wasn't footing the entire bill for what sounded like a $9,000 vacation. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, then she said she'd think about it, and hung up abruptly. I remember feeling uneasy after that conversation, but with my wedding just weeks away, I pushed the worry aside. Big mistake. The wedding day itself started perfectly. The ceremony went off without a hitch, the speeches were heartfelt, and even the weather cooperated. My sister seemed unusually warm and social, cracking jokes with my friends and actually engaging with relatives she usually avoided like the plague. Looking back, it was almost too perfect. But I told myself not to be paranoid. Maybe she was just in a good mood. When the time came for the traditional cake cutting, the music lowered and guests began gathering around to watch. That cake meant everything to us. It had been designed by a specialty bakery my wife had fallen in love with, custom made with flavors we'd chosen together during multiple tastings. 3 tiers of intricate detail, the kind of masterpiece you photograph from every angle before even thinking about cutting into it. I noticed my sister positioning herself unusually close to the cake table, grinning at me across the room with an expression I couldn't quite read. She rested her hand on the edge of the table, almost like she was steadying herself. Then, with what I can only describe as a deliberate little flick of her wrist, she sent the entire cake toppling forward. The sound it made hitting the floor, a wet, heavy thud, will stay with me forever. The top tier rolled across the carpet, leaving streaks of buttercream icing in its wake. The middle tier cracked in half, spilling elaborate sugar flowers everywhere. The entire reception hall went silent. You could hear forks being quietly set down on plates, chairs creaking as people shifted uncomfortably. No one wanted to openly gasp or react, but I could feel waves of second-hand embarrassment radiating from every guest. A few people exchanged quick, horrified glances, but most just stared at their hands, pretending nothing had happened. My sister looked directly at me, still wearing that same sweet smile, and announced that she'd accidentally knocked it over. Then, almost cheerfully, she suggested I'd have to order another one, as if a $2,700 custom wedding cake could be replaced like a grocery store cupcake on a Tuesday afternoon. Before I could even process what had happened, let alone respond, my mother stepped in. She didn't ask what had occurred. She didn't look shocked or concerned. She just looked straight at me and said, "Don't be selfish." In that instant, everything clicked into place. The timing, the deliberate nature of what she'd done, the way my mother immediately jumped to her defense. This was my sister's revenge for refusing to bankroll her Hawaiian getaway. And my own mother was completely fine with it. That was the moment I decided this would be the absolute last time my sister humiliated me or took advantage of my generosity. After the reception finally wound down and the last confused guest had drifted out, I sat in the corner of our hotel suite, still in my dress shirt and loosened tie, staring at my phone. My wife had collapsed onto the bed, her elaborate dress spread around her like she'd just survived a battle. She fell asleep within minutes, but my mind wouldn't let me rest. The humiliation kept replaying in perfect, excruciating detail, the frosting smeared across the carpet, the way people's eyes had flicked away from me like they didn't want to be caught witnessing my embarrassment, my mother stepping in to scold me instead of the person who'd actually caused the problem. It wasn't just about the cake. It was about the message. You don't do what we want. We'll make sure you regret it. And they expected me to swallow it, smile, and move on like nothing had happened. I wasn't angry in the explosive way that makes you shout or slam doors. I was cold, calculating angry, the kind where your thoughts sharpen and you start looking for pressure points. And my sister had handed me a big one. Months earlier, when she'd first started planning this Hawaii trip, she'd insisted I set up the booking under my travel account. She claimed it was because I had better credit and could access better deals. I hadn't thought much of it at the time. I'd handled family bookings before. But that also meant every reservation, every payment, every cancellation control was under my name and my authority. I opened the travel app and pulled up her itinerary, feeling my pulse quicken as I scrolled through the details. First-class flights for 2. 7 nights at a luxury resort with a private ocean view balcony. Prepaid excursions including helicopter rides over volcanoes, catamaran dinner cruises, private waterfall hikes, and that famous dolphin encounter she'd been raving about. The total cost, just over $9,000 of premium vacation experience. It was all there, and it was all mine to control. The urge to hit cancel immediately was almost unbearable, but I knew my sister was unpredictable enough to try salvaging the trip if she discovered the cancellation right away. Airlines and resorts often allow reversals if you catch them quickly enough. The longer I waited, the smaller that window became. So I forced myself to wait. I sat there in the dark hotel room, scrolling through the photos of the resort she'd been sending to our family group chat for weeks, hearing her smug voice in my head as she described the champagne service and VIP treatment she was expecting. I thought about how she must have pictured herself lounging poolside with that boyfriend she barely knew, sending me photos just to rub salt in the wound. At 2:47 a.m., I finally made my move. I took my laptop into the bathroom, closed the door so the light wouldn't wake my wife, and began systematically dismantling her dream vacation, piece by piece. Flights cancelled, with confirmation emails sent directly to my inbox. Resort reservation cancelled, full refund processing back to my credit card. All the prepaid excursions, the dolphin swim, the helicopter tour, the sunset dinner cruise, wiped out with a few clicks. It took less than 20 minutes to erase her entire Hawaiian fantasy. Then I went one step further. I changed all the login credentials on the account. If she tried to access it, she'd be completely locked out. The only proof her trip had ever existed would be the screenshots she'd already sent to friends and family, and those wouldn't get her anywhere with customer service. When I closed the laptop, I didn't feel guilt or regret. I felt a strange stillness, like a clock had finally stopped its incessant ticking. For the first time in years, I wasn't playing defense against my family's demands. I crawled back into bed, listening to the faint sounds of the city outside our window, and fell asleep faster than I'd thought possible. The first sound I heard the next morning wasn't our alarm clock. It was my phone buzzing in short, frantic bursts against the nightstand. At first, I ignored it, staying buried under the pillows. But the buzzing didn't stop. When I finally reached over to check, the screen was lit up with missed calls, 11 from my sister, 4 from my mother, and 2 from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't need to guess who that was. Her boyfriend probably thought he could negotiate with me like this was some kind of business deal. I set the phone face down and just listened to the quiet hotel room. My wife was still sleeping peacefully beside me. She didn't ask about the calls when she woke up. She didn't need to. She'd been there the night before when my sister had reduced our $2,700 wedding centerpiece to a pile of crumbs and smeared frosting. Then came the pounding on our door. Not polite knocks, full force hits that rattled the latch and echoed down the hotel hallway. "Fix it!" My sister's voice cut through the walls. "I know you canceled it. You can't do this to us." That word, us, almost made me laugh out loud. She'd known this guy for maybe 3 months, but suddenly they were a united front when it came to spending my money. I opened the door just wide enough to see her standing there in wrinkled sweatpants and an oversized hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail that looked more like she'd given up than gotten ready. She thrust her phone toward me, the airline's cancellation notice glowing in angry red letters on the screen. Her boyfriend lurked behind her, leaning against the wall and pretending to scroll through his own phone like this whole scene was none of his concern. She launched into a frantic explanation. The flights were gone, the resort said their room had been released, the excursions were showing as non-refundable cancellations. She delivered it all like I'd made some clerical error that just needed to be undone before the system finalized everything. I didn't respond immediately. I just sipped the coffee I'd poured a moment earlier and let her keep talking until her words started tripping over each other in increasing desperation. That's when my mother appeared at the end of the hallway, moving with purpose. She didn't look confused or concerned, she looked ready to launch into a lecture. She got close enough to point a finger at me before she even opened her mouth. "This is going too far, James. You don't punish family over petty things." "Petty?" I almost burst out laughing. That's what she was calling it. My sister destroying a $2,700 custom wedding cake in front of nearly 100 guests, forcing them to stand there in awkward silence while she smiled and told me to get another one. I stepped out into a hallway, coffee mug still in hand, and told them both exactly how things were going to be from now on. No more trips funded by me. No more emergencies that somehow always required my credit card. No more humiliation disguised as family bonding. That part of my life was officially over. My sister's eyes filled with tears, but it wasn't remorse I saw there. It was pure rage at realizing the free ride had just come to a screeching halt. She tried one last desperate tactic, offering to make it up to me if I would just restore the booking. I told her it was impossible. The trip was gone, and this time, so was my patience. The hallway went quiet after I closed the door, but I knew my sister well enough to know she hadn't suddenly decided to accept defeat gracefully. She never retreated without trying another angle first. I poured myself a second cup of coffee and settled by the window to watch the street below while my wife read quietly on the bed. It didn't take long for the next wave to hit. About an hour later, my phone started buzzing again, not with calls this time, but with messages from family members I hadn't heard from in months. "James, what's this I hear about you canceling your sister's vacation? Your mom says she's devastated. Is this really about a cake? Can't you just be the bigger person here? Families should stick together. Maybe you're taking this too far?" I didn't need to guess where they were getting their information. My sister had moved fast, spreading her version of events before I'd even finished my morning coffee. In her telling, I'd apparently gone out of my way to ruin her once-in-a-lifetime trip, out of pure spite. Notably absent from her story, any mention of the $2,700 wedding cake lying in pieces on the reception hall floor, the months of entitlement leading up to it, or her expectation that I should hand over thousands of dollars without question or gratitude. By lunchtime, it seemed like half the extended family had picked sides. Some were politely trying to stay neutral. Others were bluntly telling me I'd crossed the line. A few cousins I barely spoke to sent one-line texts like, "Not cool," or simply, "Wow." I ignored them all, but the unexpected hit came later that afternoon. One of my groomsmen, Kyle, texted me a blurry photo that made my blood run cold at first. Then I realized what I was looking at and started laughing. My sister and her boyfriend were standing in the middle of the airport departure lounge, holding a giant cardboard sign with thick black letters. "Help! We're stranded!" Kyle had been catching a work flight, and overheard them telling anyone who would listen that their vacation had been sabotaged by a vindictive family member who had control over their travel funds. They were hoping sympathetic travelers might either give them money directly or post their story online to go viral. And people did start posting about it. Within an hour, a photo of them with their makeshift sign appeared on a local travel community page. The initial comments were sympathetic, travelers sharing similar horror stories and offering advice. Then someone recognized my sister. A guest from my wedding had uploaded a short video the night before, a shaky phone clip of the moment my sister, accidentally, knocked over our cake, complete with audio of her laughing and telling me to just order another one. It wasn't meant to go viral, but once people connected the woman begging for money at the airport with the same woman from the wedding cake video, the sympathy evaporated faster than spilled water on hot pavement. The tone of the comments changed dramatically. "Wait, why are they depending on family to fund their vacation? She's a grown adult. Buy your own tickets. This is the same girl who destroyed her brother's wedding cake for revenge. Yeah, no wonder he canceled on her. Who expects someone else to pay for their romantic getaway? The audacity is unreal." Then someone did some deeper digging and found an older Facebook post where my sister had bragged about never paying for trips because family always comes through. Screenshots of that post spread like wildfire across multiple social media platforms. By the end of the night, the original airport photo had been taken down, but it was far too late. It had already been shared thousands of times, complete with context about the wedding incident. When I woke up the next morning, my phone wasn't full of relatives telling me to fix the situation. Instead, it was full of messages from the same people saying maybe they'd been wrong to judge so quickly, maybe they hadn't heard the full story after all. Some just sent a single word. Wow. My sister didn't call once that day. The energy from my family shifted completely over the next 48 hours. The same people who had been lecturing me about family loyalty and forgiveness suddenly had nothing to say. No more texts demanding I make things right. No more voicemails trying to guilt me into sending money. The silence told me everything. They'd all seen the video, and they finally understood what had really happened. Nobody came out and directly said, "We were wrong about you." But the change in tone was unmistakable. A couple of aunts sent awkward messages like, "Well, there are always two sides to every story," which was their diplomatic way of admitting they jumped to conclusions based on incomplete information. Others didn't message at all, which in my family was code for, "We're hoping to quietly pretend we never took sides in the first place." 2 days passed before my sister finally reached out. When she did, it wasn't to apologize or take responsibility. Instead, she wanted to talk things through and move forward, which was her way of saying she wanted me to help clean up the mess she'd created for herself online. I told her flat out that I hadn't posted the wedding video, but even if I had, I wouldn't be taking it down. I reminded her that I didn't humiliate her in front of 100 people, she did that to me. I didn't make her demand thousands for a vacation she couldn't afford, she chose that path herself. She got quiet, and for once in her life, she didn't have a comeback ready. That was the last time we spoke for months. My mother made one half-hearted attempt to smooth things over, calling with her voice all soft and conciliatory, telling me that family is all we have, and that holding grudges isn't healthy for anyone. I told her this wasn't a grudge, it was boundaries. A grudge means you sit around dwelling on the past and plotting revenge. Boundaries mean you make sure the past doesn't repeat itself. The fallout for my sister extended far beyond the cancelled Hawaii trip. Several of her friends, the ones who lived for tagging themselves in her vacation photos, started avoiding her entirely. She went from constantly posting about VIP treatment everywhere to locking down her social media accounts and going completely silent. Her boyfriend didn't last much longer either. From what I heard through the family grapevine, they broke up within a month. I can only imagine how that conversation went down. And me? I noticed something remarkable within just a few weeks. The emergency phone calls disappeared completely. No more last-minute crises that somehow always required my credit card. No more guilt trips about being the only one in the family who can help. The moment I stopped giving, the demands evaporated like they'd never existed in the first place. I realized I'd been feeding this problem for years without understanding it. By cutting off her trip, I'd cut off something much bigger, the idea that I would always be there to clean up her messes and bankroll her lifestyle. That realization was worth more than any vacation. Months passed in blissful quiet. No surprise charges appearing on my credit cards. No dramatic calls about sudden emergencies. My sister hadn't spoken to me, texted me, or even acknowledged my existence. If it weren't for my mother occasionally mentioning her in passing, I could have convinced myself she'd moved to another planet. Life had settled into something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine peace. The constant low-level anxiety of waiting for the next financial emergency was completely gone. My bank statements became predictable, pleasant reading instead of monthly investigations into mystery charges I'd agreed to. Just this once. I thought that chapter of my life was permanently closed. Then one Tuesday morning, everything changed again. I was going through my emails before work, deleting the usual promotional spam, when I spotted something that made my coffee cup freeze halfway to my lips. A subject line from the same travel company I'd used to book, and later cancel, her Hawaii trip. At first glance, I assumed it was just another promotional offer. They'd been sending me special deals for months, trying to get me to book another vacation. But this email wasn't generic marketing. It had my full name in the header and the word confirmation in bold letters. When I opened it, my stomach dropped straight through the floor. It wasn't a trip I'd booked. It was hers. Again. All the details were right there: a week-long all-inclusive Caribbean getaway for 2 passengers, ocean view suite, prepaid excursions, departing in less than 2 weeks. And the payment? Charged directly to my credit card, just like before. I sat back in my desk chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. I had locked that travel account down completely. I changed the password, the security questions, everything. How the hell had she gotten back in? But there it was, same playbook, different destination, different boyfriend, and still the same expectation that I would foot the bill without so much as a courtesy text asking permission. I felt that familiar cold burn I'd experienced on my wedding night when she knocked over our cake, but this time I didn't act on pure impulse. I didn't immediately reach for the cancel button. Instead, I found myself thinking, the first time I canceled her trip, it was about reclaiming control and stopping her from using me. This time, it could be about something bigger, teaching her a lesson she'd never, ever forget. I checked the booking details more carefully. Everything was fully paid for and confirmed. All the reservation numbers were valid. They were really going to the Caribbean in exactly 13 days. An idea began forming in my mind, something that would leave a much more lasting impression than just pulling the rug out from under her at the last second. I could cancel the trip, sure. Or I could let it play out just far enough that when she fell, it would hurt worse and teach her never to try this again. I closed my laptop without making any changes, that cold smile spreading across my face. She still thought she was untouchable, that she could manipulate and use me without consequences. That belief was about to be shattered in the most spectacular way possible. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you exactly how I made sure my sister learned that some lessons only stick when they leave scars. It had been just over a month since I discovered that surprise Caribbean vacation booking on my credit card, and I promised I'd write an update when the situation was resolved. Well, it's over now, and the results exceeded even my wildest expectations. When I first saw that booking confirmation, my immediate instinct was to cancel everything instantly, just like I'd done with the Hawaii trip. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had a rare opportunity here. Canceling would sting, sure, but it would be predictable. She'd just run crying to the family again, spinning some story about how I'd ruined her life over a misunderstanding, and maybe generate enough sympathy to try the same trick again in a few months. No, this time I wanted her to walk right up to the edge of her fantasy before she realized the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. So I waited. For 12 agonizing days, I didn't say a word to her or my mother. I let her think she'd successfully pulled off the ultimate heist, imagining her already mentally rehearsing the grateful Instagram posts she'd share from her oceanside suite. Meanwhile, I got to work on something much more satisfying. First, I called the resort directly. I confirmed the booking was fully paid and under my name, then told them I needed to change the guest names on the reservation. The front desk didn't care at all. As long as everything was paid in full, they'd swap names without question. Same thing with all the prepaid excursions, the catamaran sunset cruise, the snorkeling tour, the couple's spa package. All I had to do was email over new identification for the replacement guests. And who were these replacement guests? Jack and Marlene, a retired couple who live a few houses down from me. They're the kind of neighbors everyone wishes they had, the type who water your plants when you're out of town, wave from their front porch when you get home from work, and shovel your sidewalk without being asked. A few years ago, Jack had mentioned in passing that they'd never been able to afford the kind of luxury vacation they dreamed about their whole working lives. When this opportunity literally fell into my lap, I decided they were the perfect candidates for an unexpected windfall. When I knocked on their door and told them they were going to the Caribbean, all expenses paid, ocean view suite, full excursion package included, Marlene actually started crying. Jack laughed for a full minute straight, convinced I was pulling some elaborate joke until I handed him the printed confirmation with their names on it. The only thing left to handle was the flights. I left those untouched until the very last moment, the night before the scheduled departure. Then I canceled them and processed the refund back to my card. By then, Jack and Marlene had already booked their own flights using frequent flyer miles they'd been saving for years, waiting for the right occasion to use them. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. The morning of what my sister thought was her big departure day, she called me at exactly 6:42 a.m. The first call went to voicemail. So did the second, third, and fourth. Then came the increasingly frantic text messages. The tickets are gone. The airline says you canceled them. The hotel says we're not on their guest list anymore. What's going on? Call me right now. This isn't funny. Fix this immediately. I didn't respond to any of them. I just sat there with my morning coffee, watching my phone buzz with increasing desperation. A few hours later, While my sister was presumably melting down at the airport, my phone buzzed with a completely different kind of message. It was a photo from Marlene, she and Jack standing on their resort balcony, holding colorful tropical drinks, with the most stunning Caribbean sunset blazing behind them like something out of a travel magazine. The caption read, "Best trip of our lives. Thank you, James." I immediately printed that photo and had it professionally framed. It now sits on the bookshelf in my living room where I see it every single day, and it never fails to make me smile. The fallout from my sister was exactly as predictable as I had expected. She tried to rally the family against me again, painting me as vindictive and cruel for stealing her vacation. But this time, nobody took the bait. Too many people still remembered the wedding cake video. Too many had watched her humiliate me in front of nearly 100 guests while smiling like it was all just innocent fun. Some relatives even told her directly that she'd had it coming. Her boyfriend didn't stick around for the aftermath either. From what I heard through the family grapevine, he bailed less than 2 weeks after the airport disaster. I can only imagine how that breakup conversation played out. Probably something about how he'd signed up for a free Caribbean vacation, not a front row seat to family drama. And my mother? She hasn't brought up either trip once since then. She's remained civil when we talk, but I can tell she understands that the entire dynamic has shifted permanently. The days of guilt-tripping me into being the family's financial safety net are over. It's been remarkably quiet since then. No more surprise charges appearing on my statements. No more emergency calls that somehow always require my immediate financial intervention. No more being expected to fund other people's dreams while they treat me like an ATM with legs. For the first time in my adult life, I don't feel guilty about setting boundaries. I don't second-guess myself or wonder if I'm being too harsh. I simply enjoy the peace that comes from not being anyone's backup plan. But I think the most satisfying part of this whole situation isn't that I took the trip away from her, it's that I gave it to people who genuinely appreciated and deserved it. My sister can stew in her entitlement all she wants. Meanwhile, Jack and Marlene have memories they'll treasure and talk about for the rest of their lives. They've already shown me hundreds of photos and shared stories that make them laugh until they cry. And that's exactly how this story ends. Completely. At least until she tries something like this again. And if she does, I'll be ready. The funny thing is, since the Caribbean incident, I've started hearing from other relatives in a completely different tone. Not the old, "Can you help us out?" tone I'd grown so tired of, but genuine, "How are you doing?" conversations. I think they're testing the waters, trying to figure out if I'm really done being the person they can lean on financially. The answer is yes. Permanently. Jack and Marlene have stopped by my place twice since returning from their trip, both times bearing gifts. A hand-carved wooden sea turtle and a bottle of rum so potent it could probably strip paint. They tell me stories about their adventures, laughing so hard they tear up, and every single time I listen to them, I feel more certain that I made exactly the right call. My sister hasn't spoken to me in person since that frantic morning of the missing tickets. And honestly, I'm completely fine with that arrangement. If silence is the price I have to pay for peace, I'll pay it gladly every single time.